Now, what are some common use cases of Orion, our AI-powered data analyst? The way I usually think about it is, what could you do if you had five more analysts that don't mind when to work and they never get tired? They are always enthusiastic. Like, what would you have them do? And most organizations have a few thoughts. The first one is probably around scaled insights. Any kind of reporting where you want to report back to your vendors, your customers, your investors, but where it might have to be unique to each one of those recipients, and therefore it would be difficult to do so at scale. Where you might be able to, do that for your top 10 vendors or your top 10 customers, but it would be harder to do it for 100 of them. Now, that's a great use case for Orion. It doesn't get tired when it does the same report with a little bit of a tweak for the 100th time, or looks at the data. So let's take a very concrete example. A large national grocery store needs to let all their vendors know of how many items they're going to buy next month. So let's say, Ben and Jerry's ice cream. It's a very popular ice cream brand. Certain flavors are really popular, and this grocery store, it's a large one, they need to let them know how many are going to be ordered probably next month. So Ben and Jerry's is ready for it and can actually produce those already, and maybe even get them already into the regional distribution centers. Another example would be that you need to report to the professionals using your platform on what the usage is, where there's maybe some parts of your platform that the professionals haven't really used much that they should pay attention to. So kind of product-based reporting. There could be scenarios. One of our customers, the North American Blueberry Council, they need to report to all the different blueberry farmers. Some have production in the US, right? Some have it abroad, and they need to be able to tell them what is going on, what do they see in the market. Now, an aspect that comes to mind there as well when we talk about scaled insights or just scaled data analytics is the ability to dive deep. So back to the example where the grocery store needs to tell Ben and Jerry's how much ice cream they need. Well, Orion can take into account like weather patterns, demographic information. It can look at all the past purchases for like past purchasing patterns for a given zip code. There's so many zip codes, right? It would be very, very difficult for a human analyst to compile an analysis for each of those zip codes. For Orion, that's not a problem. It can create, thousands of these reports, then look at weather patterns by zip code. It can look at, it is very aware of search trends, anything else that might have been taken into account beyond the data that you already have. And then it can provide a quite specific forecast for that zip code. And, then of course it can do it at scale. So having the ability to have, five, quote unquote here, five additional analysts available to you is that you can now really dive deep on things that were just prohibitive to do because it would have been so expensive for you to explore before in terms of time. Right? You don't have five people that are just sitting around that can spend 40, 80 hours on this. Well, now with Orion, you do. Another example that's quite common is detecting if something is an insight-worthy anomaly or if it's actually a data quality issue. So many times, right, you have a lot of different reports out there, and you're trying to, of course, catch data quality issues somewhere in the chain, but you don't always catch them. Well, one of the functions of Orion is that it can always check, is something a insight or is it actually broken? Is the underlying, if we dive deep into something jumping up or down, a certain key metric, if we dive deep into it and go to the root cause, is it because something dropped off? Or is it something that's actually a reasonable jump in one of the underlying, let's say, marketing campaigns, or a certain product did much better than expected? So that's another way to think about a scaled approach to data analysis. One that is not quite as common, but like one of our customers, their database is incredibly slow. Well, that really, like I was an analyst before, right? It's incredibly demotivating. You're running a query, it takes a long time, you finally get the results back. You're not going to tweak it a bunch more times. You're not going to run 100 iterations of it. So you call it good after a couple of days or after a couple of hours, probably even. And that's the analysis. And you present it, and the business takes analysis as is. Well, the first day we engaged with this customer, Orion actually ran all night. It went for 9 hours. And it looked all kinds of things that actually were quite obvious, but nobody had ever spent the time to dive just a bit deeper. And yeah, those are some interesting use cases for Orion. So I think the scaled insights, getting it to outside audiences, the ability to dive really deep and create very specific analysis predictions for, like, let's say a zip code or a certain user cohort, and then detecting if something is actually broken, right, and letting you know before anyone else knows. And with that, right, I really see Orion as a tool that can promote the data hero in the organization, because Orion then gives you insights that you can take to your stakeholders, something where you probably previously would have spent a ton of time and people resources to investigate and come up with. And now it can suggest to you a lot of things to look at and already some insights to actually arm you with these conversations. Another use case for Orion is coming up with hypotheses and things you might want to investigate. So Orion has a very holistic understanding of the world, right? It is fully aware of your organization, of the data of your organization, and so it can formulate hypotheses. And where, like, oftentimes an internal analytics team, right, you have a lot of responsibilities already on your plate. So you don't just go look around and think of other things you might want to put on your plate. Well, Orion has a lot of time, right? Time is really not important to it. And it doesn't matter to it that it takes on a lot more work. So it just goes and thinks of things that we might want to look at. Like, hey, our lifetime value calculation for our customers haven't been updated for 6 months. Or our spend targets for new customer acquisitions have been set 12 months ago. We should reset that. But it can suggest things that maybe you haven't really thought about because you have been so long at the organization that a fresh perspective, a very well-informed fresh perspective, is actually quite beneficial. Yeah, those are some good use cases for Orion, and I'm always happy to brainstorm other ones as well.